Happiness becomes urgent the moment ambition stops delivering what it promised. Welcome to another story in the series From Wonder to Power, The Journey of Thought. Today I want to show you how philosophy turns away from the city, from rivalry and honor, and asks a quieter but sharper question. How can a human being live without fear? After Plato and Aristotle, something feels exhausted. Ideals are demanding, virtue requires effort, politics never rests. The Epicureans step back and notice a pattern. Much of human suffering does not come from need, but from false belief. Fear of gods, fear of death, fear of loss. Desire inflated beyond what life can satisfy. They ask whether wisdom might consist not in rising higher, but in needing less. Epicurus does not offer heroism or transcendence. He offers relief. Happiness, he argues, is not pleasure piled high, but pain reduced. Not excess, but sufficiency. Not public recognition, but inner calm. Philosophy becomes practical medicine for the soul, aimed at freeing people from unnecessary disturbance. This episode begins where power loses its appeal. The good life is no longer sought in achievement or status, but in moderation, friendship, and freedom from fear. Thought turns inward. Not to escape reality, but to make it bearable. Here, philosophy chooses peace over glory. In the early afternoon, when heat presses down and the streets smell of oil and dust, Leontios sits in the shade of a fig tree beyond the city wall. He is not escaping work, only noise. His hands are rough, his back stiff from carrying amphorae since dawn. What he wants is not excitement, honor, or recognition. He wants the dull ache in his shoulders to ease and the tightness in his chest to loosen. When it does, even briefly, he feels something close to happiness, though he would not have called it that before. In the city, pleasure is spoken of loudly. It belongs to banquets, heavy wine, music that lasts too long, desires that grow faster than they can be satisfied. Leontios has watched how this kind of pleasure behaves. It arrives with promises and leaves with costs. Hunger returns sharper. Sleep grows lighter. Worry multiplies. What Epicurus teaches in the garden reaches him not as doctrine, but as recognition. Pleasure is not something to chase. It appears when pain withdraws. The body rests. The mind settles. Nothing dramatic. Leontios begins to test this quietly. He eats simple food and notices hunger fade without spectacle. He drinks water instead of wine and sleeps more deeply. When he avoids a quarrel that would have offered brief satisfaction and long resentment, he feels no loss. A steady calm replaces it. Pleasure shows itself not as stimulation, but as relief. The absence of pain becomes a presence of ease. It lasts precisely because it does not intoxicate. Fear is the sharpest pain of all. Fear of gods who punish without warning. Fear of death imagined as endless suffering. Fear of losing what little one has. Epicurus does not use these fears to command obedience. He dissolves them. If gods exist, they do not interfere. When death comes, sensation ends with it. The terror that once hovered over ordinary life loosens its grip. Leontios realizes that much of his unrest was borrowed, taught by voices that fed on anxiety. Seen from above, the move is quietly radical. Pleasure is stripped of glamour and returned to the body and the mind. Happiness is no longer measured by intensity, but by how much suffering has been removed. Ethics becomes care rather than heroism. As the sun lowers, Leontios rises lighter than before. Nothing spectacular has happened, and for Epicurus, that is exactly the point. As evening settles over the city, Diodorus pauses before lighting the small lamp in his room. He hesitates, as he often does, recalling the stories learned since childhood. Gods who watch, gods who punish, gods who strike without warning. A failed sacrifice, an illness, a sudden loss at sea. Each misfortune is said to carry intention. Even now, as an adult, he feels the reflex to apologize to invisible powers for reasons he cannot name. The fear is not sharp, it is constant. It hums beneath ordinary life. In the streets, this fear is cultivated with care. Priests speak of divine displeasure. Poets dress punishment in fire and judgment. Parents frighten children into obedience by invoking what waits beyond death. Diodorus notices how easily fear becomes discipline. A man who believes the gods are watching needs little force. A man who imagines endless suffering after death accepts present misery more readily. Epicurus's teaching reaches him not as rebellion, but as release. If the gods exist, they are not wardens of human error. Perfect beings lack nothing, and therefore interfere with nothing. Fear, seen clearly, looks unnecessary rather than wise. Death weighs heavier still. Diodorus has watched bodies burn on the pyre and has imagined himself there, conscious, trapped, punished forever. Epicurus names this fear and removes its ground. Death is not an experience. Where sensation ends, suffering cannot begin. Before birth, there was no pain. After death, there is no subject left to endure anything at all. The terror that once filled his nights thins, not through bravery, but through understanding. What cannot be felt cannot harm. This clarity shifts daily life quietly. Diodorus no longer rushes to appease unseen forces when fortune changes. When illness comes, he treats it as a condition of the body, not a verdict from above. When others panic over omens, he listens without joining them. Life does not become safer. It becomes lighter. The future loosens its grip. The present grows sufficient. Seen from above, the intervention is decisive. Epicurean philosophy identifies fear, not desire, as the main engine of suffering. By dissolving fear of gods and death, it removes the deepest tools of control in ancient life. Ethics turns inward, away from obedience and toward tranquility. As the lamp burns steady, Diodorus lies down without prayer, not in defiance, but in peace. Sleep arrives without negotiation. At first light, Philemon counts what he owns without effort. A clay cup, a coarse cloak, bread for the day, a place to lie down. Nothing here is impressive, yet it brings an unexpected calm. In the city, abundance always demands defense. Wealth must be guarded, status maintained, appearances managed. Philemon has lived that life before, and remembers how possessions multiplied faster than satisfaction. Each new comfort created a new anxiety about losing it. In the garden, simplicity is not praised as sacrifice, but as strategy. Epicurus speaks of desires as unequal. Some are natural and necessary: food, shelter, friendship. Some are natural but unnecessary: luxury, refinement, excess. Others are empty altogether, born from opinion rather than need. Philemon learns to sort them not by rule but by outcome. When he eats plain food, hunger ends. When he seeks rare pleasures, craving grows. The body asks for little. It is imagination that inflates demand. This way of living reshapes his days. He works enough to secure what is sufficient and stops before effort hardens into strain. He accepts weather, delay, and small discomforts without anger, because his happiness no longer depends on perfect conditions. When others boast of feasts or lament losses, he feels neither envy nor pity. Their lives seem louder, but not freer. His grows quieter, and in that quiet, steadier. Friendship deepens within these limits. With little to compete over, conversation loosens. Shared meals are modest and regular. Trust replaces display. Philemon notices that pleasure lasts longer when it is not decorated. Tranquility, once imagined as rare, reveals itself as a background state, interrupted mainly by unnecessary wants. Seen from above, the logic is precise. Simple living reduces exposure to chance. By needing less, the Epicurean becomes less vulnerable to fortune's swings. Ethics turns into subtraction rather than accumulation. The good life is secured not by mastering the world, but by closing the gap between what one has and what one needs. As evening returns, Philemon feels no urgency to improve the day. Nothing presses. Nothing is missing. In this stillness, Epicurus's promise becomes clear. Tranquility is not a reward for discipline, but the natural result of living simply. As dusk settles over the garden, Nicias places another loaf on the low table and waits for the others to arrive. No invitations are sent, no obligations enforced. They come because they wish to, and because they know they will be received without judgment. In the city, relationships are measured by usefulness, loyalty tested by advantage, alliances held together by fear or ambition. Here, friendship grows under different conditions. It is not a path to power, but a refuge from it, you see. Nicias has learned that solitude sharpens anxiety. Alone, the mind invents threats and enlarges small losses. Among friends, fear loses its authority. Epicurus teaches that while pleasure begins in the body, security is completed in trust. A friend is someone before whom vigilance can rest. No status must be defended, no image performed. In such company, even silence feels safe. The absence of threat becomes a shared good. This community is deliberately small. Epicurus does not promise harmony on the scale of the city. Politics feeds on rivalry, and public life thrives on comparison. The garden offers a different structure, a voluntary association bound by mutual care rather than law. Nicias notices how conflicts lose force here. With little property and fewer ambitions, disputes lack fuel. When disagreement appears, it is handled without theatre, because no one needs to win. Ethical life takes shape through these relationships. Kindness is not demanded by duty, but sustained by recognition. Helping a friend feels natural, not heroic, because tomorrow the roles may reverse. Trust replaces command. Gratitude replaces fear. Nicias understands that this is not withdrawal from humanity, but a redefinition of it. The moral unit is no longer the city or lineage, but the circle of those who choose to share life. Seen from above, the innovation is quiet but radical. Epicurean ethics shifts morality from public obligation to private solidarity. Friendship becomes the highest form of justice because it removes the need for enforcement. Community is not built to endure history, but to endure life. As night deepens, voices fade into laughter and rest. The garden grows still, not empty. Here, philosophy lives not in argument, but in companionship. By the end of this episode, happiness no longer looks like achievement or recognition. It looks like relief. What Epicurus gains is precision. Suffering is traced not to fate or desire itself, but to false belief, unnecessary fear, and inflated wants. Pleasure is stripped of excess and returned to its quiet core. The body at ease, the mind undisturbed. Freedom appears not as control over the world, but as independence from what the world threatens to take away. What is lost is ambition in its grand form. Epicurean wisdom does not promise greatness, historical impact, or moral heroism. It offers something smaller and steadier. Safety from terror, sufficiency instead of status, friendship instead of power. For those seeking peace rather than glory, this is not a loss at all. With this turn, philosophy withdraws from the city without abandoning humanity. Ethics becomes care. Community becomes chosen. The good life becomes something that can survive uncertainty because it demands so little from it. In the next episode, philosophy will answer the same fragile world in a very different way. The Stoics will not retreat from fate, fear, or necessity. They will confront them directly. If suffering cannot always be avoided, they will ask, how must one live so that it no longer rules the soul? Next time, we turn to virtue as living according to nature, where freedom is found not in removing pain, but in mastering response.